I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now.
All right. So for tonight's Heartbeat episode, I've got John Thomas from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, who is an opinion reporter with the Western Standard. And what I want to do is I want to give John just a couple of seconds to get him to introduce himself to the crew. And we'll wait for some people to kind of dive on in and then hop into the conversation. So, John, thanks for coming out for a quick, short notice conversation. You know, we talked like for two tweets last night, and then like 45 seconds on the phone today. So, I wanted to thank you for being available, and thank you for hopping on the call, and definitely looking forward to hearing some of your insights tonight, man.
Awesome. Thanks. Like I was saying on X, that really do appreciate the invite. This is my first time doing a live stream. So yeah, I'm always game to try something new, and we'll see how this one goes, whether I do another one.
Well, and it's funny when you actually start to get into these things and you start having conversations, and I'm sure you'll find the same. It's at the end of the conversation, you'll be like, you know what, that was actually really cool. And when other people come to invite you, there's not going to be that same apprehension, and it's going to be just, I got online, had a conversation like I would on the phone, and had some really good feedback from a lot of great people. And inside the community that we're in, just so you know where you're at or who my crew is, and I'm sure you've done a little bit of research on me, is, we're predominantly, conservative-minded folk. We're all troubled with what's going on inside of Canada. And, it's just about having open discussions and elevating the conversations that I think that we still need to keep on having.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I agreed to come on was because that is what I saw. I mean, when someone invites you on to speak online, I think you got to do your due diligence. And, I've seen some of your past live streams. So this was the right choice for me, and I'm excited to share some insights on here tonight.
No, and that's awesome. So, I mean, we can go through the obligatories and talk about the weather and how the planet's not on fire right now. I know I'd seen you post a tweet on how windy it is in Saskatchewan right now by standing in the street and basically being blown away. So we're really not seeing that. The global boiling this year, but they're still talking about the fires. I've seen the fire situation inside of British Columbia, and it looks like they're, I'm not going to say they're intentionally letting northeastern BC prourn, but it looks like they're trying to set Alberta on fire by being a little haphazard in their actions. Alberta's got things under control, and proud to say that my youngest boy, former Canadian military, is now part of Alberta wildfires. So he's out there. He was up in high level for a short period of time. He's back down in Calgary now. Kind of manning the troops. Yep. And things inside of the province of Alberta are looking okay. Despite the fact that 80% of the fires that we've seen are human caused, or by arson or mishap or negligence. So have you had a look at what's going on inside of Saskatchewan by way of wildfires? Like, what did you guys have for a situation last year, and what is it looking like this year?
Well, I think last year was pretty bad. The whole province, or most of Western Canada, was hit pretty hard with the drought. So, in terms of wildfire situations, it wasn't ideal. This year so far, I don't think things are too bad. There have been a couple, but we've been fortunate so far, and I think Alberta has too, with quite a bit of early rain this spring. So hopefully that'll carry on throughout the summer, and we won't see as much, forest fires and smoky conditions in the province this year.
Yeah, it was kind of gross last year by way of the smoke and kind of how things were, really really terrible. They weren't as bad inside of Alberta, especially inside of Calgary, as they were. I'm going to say about 5 or 6 years ago, where we'd wake up and there'd literally ash on all of our vehicles, like there was a layer of ash on everything, and there wasn't even a fire inside of the province. Like it was all coming from BC. That was all basically blowing in from BC.
Yeah.
We didn't have that last year, but the smoke was pretty bad. So you guys had some late snow, and you've had a lot of rain so far this season, and they call drought inside of the province of Alberta here, and even inside of Calgary, our local mayor still wants to consider us in somewhat of drought conditions and wants to keep us on water restrictions. Are you guys on any sort of water restrictions in Saskatchewan?
I can't speak for the rest of the province. There's nothing right now in the Moose Jaw area. We've got, I think, a relatively good supply in the reservoir, and with the runoff being relatively decent, it hasn't come up. So, and as long as I've lived here, which is about 3.5 years now, we haven't had any significant restrictions in this area. So,
Well, that's a good deal.
yeah.
Where are you from originally? If you've only been out in Moose Jaw for the last 3 years.
I grew up west central Saskatchewan, so right on the Alberta-Saskatchewan border, a little, on a farm near the village of Alsask.
Okay.
And folks who travel between Saskatoon and Calgary might be familiar with it. There's an old radar site, part of the Pine Tree Line. And so you'll see, everyone calls it the golf ball, but there's the big radar tower right on the border up on the hill. You can't miss it.
Yeah, and I've been through Alsask a couple of times just traveling. A lot of my family's from Saskatchewan, so the transport between here. But I mean, we're I'm going to say a little bit more northern, so closer to the Battleford. So sometimes through Alsask, most of the times through Lloyd, and then
Right.
we're just on the main highway. So your whole life basically in Saskatchewan. No, and that's cool. Like I said, again, I have a lot of family out in the general area, and for the most part, perspectives I don't imagine are too much different inside of Saskatchewan than they are inside of Alberta when it comes down to the political nature of the country, are they?
Yeah, and I think you had mentioned in your tweet that I did 20 years in the CAF, and so I've been exposed to a wide range of different Canadians and lived it all across the country for the most part, excluding the Northern Territories. And I think it's helped to really sort of ground my opinions in just what everyday folk are talking about.
No, and a wide range of perspectives, I think, is what's the most welcome thing. Inside of these things, my heartbeat casts, I have tried to include people from outside of my immediate circles and outside with outside different opinions. And for some reason, they're a really tough group to really kind of get on board with a conversation. That they want to chime in with a barb and then flee. So it's like, all right, troll, be on your merry way then.
Yeah,
And
I
I'm
mean, that's kind of the nature of social media now, that it's really tough to get a good dialogue going without having it devolve into an insult fest or having it, change to personal attacks. It, it does signify sort of the nature of how competitive our politics has gotten. And I think, having, a chance to talk like this is great. And, being able to talk with people from different political, ideological backgrounds is going to make a difference in the long run. So kudos to you.
not no, I really think that does make a big difference. And there has been some talks about even Dean Blundell looking to kind of host debates, from the one side to the other, and get things going. And Dean Blundell is, I'm just going to go out and call him a prick, because he's a very hostile individual to begin with, and he's very opinionated, which to a certain extent we all are. But it's his hostility and blocking and just being an outright prick that's kind of carved himself a niche inside of his own little group. And now he's looking at opening that up, and he's finding that a lot of the doors that he's closed, he's having a tough time getting open. Whereas I actually welcome, his new forum if he's going to open this up. and invite both sides to come out and have these conversations. Because the one thing that we don't see inside of Canada is we don't see a left versus right in open conversation to any great extent. We only see what the government wants us to believe or what the news is told to tell us. So, these things are kind of great. And on that same front, now you work for the Western Standard as an opinion columnist. And inside of that, do you get a lot of feedback on what you get that comes across as negative or derogatory, or do you get a lot of troll feedback, or is it mostly just people chiming in?
It's a pretty healthy mix of everything. I'm not on the payroll for the Western Standard. I'm a sort of a contract writer, so I provide my opinions, and if they like them, then they'll publish them. And I've been really fortunate to have that opportunity. I think I'm privileged to have and be a part of an independent media company in Western Canada, having been and grown up in Western Canada. As far as the trolls, there's always the discounting of my opinion because I write for the Western Standard. I see it in my Twitter feed all the time. Writes for the Western Standard, doesn't really matter. And you're never going to change. First of all, those people probably never even read the column that they were commenting on anyway. And the second thing is that if they read it, maybe they'd see that most of the things I write and a lot of the things that everyone writes for the Western Standard are relatively balanced. There's certainly a slant towards a conservative ideology, but there's been plenty of columns that have been written there that are well balanced as anything that's out there. So, yeah, I think in terms of positive and negatives in feedback, probably about 80 to 20, 80 positive, 20% negative. And that's going to be the same for anybody who writes for a periodical. There's going to be a specific sort of followership that is going to either support you or, be vehemently against you.
Well, it's like they say about all politicians, right? You either, you either love them or you hate them. So, I mean, we all get that. And, depending on which side of the topics that you're going to land on. And right now, there is no shortage of topics inside of Canada.
No.
Not everybody's going to agree with everybody on everything. And I think the one place that we're probably seeing this the most is, especially in Canada right now, well, maybe not just Canada, but I guess globally, is on the war in Gaza, the Palestinian people versus the Israelis. And I find people inside of Canada are somewhat divided in those conversations as well. And I'm really not sure what it is. Maybe a lot more people are more informed than I am. Maybe a lot more people are more concerned with what's going on in other parts of the globe. Me, I'm one of those people that just simply doesn't give a shit. I view it as a very tragic situation. What happened on October 7th, 2023 was disgusting. The people that celebrated, that danced in the street after watching 1,200 people be massacred, I don't believe are really good people. But to me, it's not a Canadian problem, yet a lot of people still like to make it ours.
Yeah, well, and, just like the war in Ukraine, this is something that's certainly affected our politics. And it's sad how badly it's divided Canadians right now. And I, like you, I don't see how there is really much debate. Hamas attacked innocent Israelis in settlements and murdered and killed and raped and beheaded. And all of that is record, it's fact, and it was unprovoked. The fact that we have people celebrating in Canada is pretty tragic, and that we're seeing an exponential rise in hate crimes towards Jewish Canadians is an abomination. It goes against everything that, all the Canadian values that we purport to hold and want to spread through our foreign policy. It just flies in the face of that. So it's pretty incredible that this is where we are as Canadians and in Canada.
And it is. And again, whenever I comment on, and it's, whether it's on Gaza or whether it's on Palestinians or whether it's on Muslims, And to be honest with you, like I have literally nothing against these people. I just don't believe it's a Canadian problem, and don't want it to be seen as a Canadian problem. Again, we have enough issues inside of the country right now that we need to focus on. We have 2 million people per month lining up at food banks. We have 8,000 Canadians in a Facebook group that are, swapping ideas on how to dumpster dive for food. We've got, I seen the statistics today posted by another Twitter person on the rate of insolvency inside of Quebec and Ontario. And I believe the rates were 21 and 30% increased year over year from last year. So we struggled through a pretty tough year in 2023, or I guess it would have been 2022, but into 2023, the YOY shows that it's things are still getting pretty bad. And they had some statistics into 2024. And I'm thinking, we've got a really desperate situation inside of Canada. And again, it's not that I can't be compassionate to people on the other side of the planet. It's just until we sort things out inside of Canada, I don't see a lot of benefit to it.
Well, I think I would have to disagree in the sense that while the war in Palestine or Palestinians between Palestinians and Israelis is a foreign conflict, it's really exposed a problem that is a Canadian problem that we're going to have to deal with. And I don't think we can ignore discussing sort of the impacts of what we've seen with the nearly weekly, daily hate rallies that are in the guise of being pro-Palestinian when they're nothing more than anti-Semitic, hate-filled rallies. And anybody who says otherwise isn't being honest with themselves, because you don't chant for intifada and killing the Jews and vandalizing synagogues and every other thing that we've been seeing on social media and on the news.
Shooting schools. They're shooting at schools.
And not just one, but like two in, I think it was Outremont in the same week. Or no, it was 2 schools in a week, 3rd shooting in Outremont.
Like one in Vancouver or something, or somewhere in BC, like Monday or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And then, broken windows, firebombing in Vancouver. So, it is a foreign conflict, but it's now a conflict here. And our politicians, the pundits that we have covering mainstream topics on the big carrier networks, this is something we need to talk about and we need to deal with, because it's no longer just a foreign conflict. It's a conflict here.
And I'm not going to deny that it is. I mean, I think exactly what you're saying is correct. It's not a Canadian problem, but it's now on Canadian soil. And again, like I don't throw a lot of really thought to it. I don't throw a lot of my time towards it. Just the odd conversation. It's like, if you're not happy here, go home. If you have a problem with something that's happening on the other side of the planet, then go there and deal with it.
Yeah.
But no, you're in fact, you are correct. It is now been made a Canadian problem. And that's just because of a lack of response to what we've actually seen. They chant for the same thing. We want peace. We want Canada to stop selling arms to Israel. But that doesn't take into any consideration as to, the treaties that they tried to work out, the ceasefires. It doesn't account for, and I mean, let's be honest here. Are there any hostages that are still surviving this inside of Palestine? I don't know. I don't keep up on the situation, but I keep seeing the one side say, we want this. And then the other side keeps saying, release the hostages and go towards a ceasefire. And I'm thinking, like, 7 months ago, after seeing what had happened to the initial hostages, they turned up in terrible, deplorable conditions. Are there any of those people still alive? And I don't know that.
Yeah, and I think I've seen other people comment that Israel should have assumed sort of from the onset that when they embarked on their attack on Hamas after October 7th, that should have sort of been the predicated position, was that the likelihood of getting the hostages back alive was low, if realistic at all. And fortunately, there have been successes in getting some of them back, and hopefully there'll be more that are repatriated. But I think I saw that there were 4 men found, the bodies of 4 men, 4 hostages found deceased in Gaza. So yeah, how much time the hostages have left, I don't know. How many are left alive? Nobody could say for sure, except for Hamas, and they're not going to say. It's not in their interest to say. And
well, it's their only bargaining chip. I don't view the a terrorist organization as being fundamentally principled on holding bargaining chips. But at the same token, I think you're probably right that whether they have it or whether they don't, they're not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, and especially if they don't anymore.
yeah,
I mean, if they say all the hostages are dead, that's really not going to do anything favorably for them on the world stage, with the UN, with UNRWA, and definitely not with Nethan and whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Let's go with that. It took me 5 years to be able to say Polyev. So, the fact that I don't talk about Israel that much, I'm not going to feel terrible about not being able to pronounce his name that great. So I'm okay. But what I'm basically saying is yeah, if they no longer have a bargaining chip, what would stop Israel from, just basically glassing the rest of what Gaza is/was, right?
Yeah, I think Israel has been held to a higher account than any other NATO or Western nation in the conduct of its conflict as it pursues Hamas through Gaza, and I have no doubt that they'll continue to behave in a manner that accords the Geneva Convention and all the other standards and rights of armed conflict. They're a professional armed force. They're a democracy, and they're in the right in pursuing Hamas. No different than the Western world went after ISIS in Iraq. It's the same thing, no difference.
Yeah, hunt them down, exterminate them. And inside of Canada, I mean, everybody talks about Palestine, Palestinians. Google has basically removed Palestine from Google Maps, and it's still considered Gaza. So Palestine doesn't officially exist. Palestinians, by that rule alone, don't exist either. But they are a party that's or a people that are run by a political party, which is a terrorist organization, as deemed by Canada by Hamas. So anybody that is supporting them, I'm under the impression, is supporting a terrorist organization. Now, again, I'm very broad in my views on this because it's just nothing to do with the lives of Canadians. So I might be wrong, and people can call me wrong on that view, and I'm fine with that because I won't engage in the conversations for much longer than it's not my problem. It's not our problem. But comes down to it, anybody that is supporting them in Canada on Canadian soil, as much as I can view it, is they're supporting a terrorist organization. What's your thoughts on that, John?
I mean, I think there's a line between wanting to see violence stop, which is a legitimate reason to protest. I don't see any problem with that. It's when you cross the line into the celebration of October 7th and the atrocities that were committed against Israelis, calls for intifada, violence against Jews, anything along those lines. You've crossed the line from protesting a war to inciting hate. And I think right now where we have a problem is that divide. And I don't think, and honestly, I think as time has gone on, the divide between those who were genuinely against any sort of conflict and violence against civilians, that is, second nature to any war, has gotten smaller, and it's more now about anti-Israel hate and hate towards Jewish people and Judaism in general. So the time for action was months ago, before the schools were shot, before synagogues were bombed, And the longer we delay sort of a unified condemnation of what we've been seeing at university campuses across Canada, the worse things are going to get.
Yeah, no, and I've said the same thing. How many people have to die before Canada actually steps in? And we'd seen protests in Canada before. We'd seen the Black Lives Matter protest in 2020. We'd seen the convoy to Ottawa. It's not like we're unfamiliar to protests over the last 5 years. Certainly within the mindset of anybody that can remember up to like 5 years ago, right? So it's not unique to us, but what we're seeing right now is something that's kind of completely different, and it's being handled in a lot different ways. So and I'd originally asked the question is like, how many people are going to have to die before Canada actually steps in to any sort of measure in the way that they did with the Freedom Convoy?
And I think that's a really interesting point, because what I've noticed from the parliamentarians that have brought it up in the House of Commons, it isn't so much about how things are unfolding here in Canada. It's always about how things are unfolding in Gaza between Hamas and Israel. When, like you said, what we need to be focusing on is that domestic aspect of this conflict that's spread to here. And that, it's one thing for, the NDP and Jagmeet Singh to, call for a ceasefire. Okay. The likelihood of that having any sort of impact on Israel is next to zero. But what will have an impact is some sort of motion from, say, Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, or the Liberals or the Conservatives or anybody to condemn what we're seeing in Canadian streets, and the focus back on, like you said, the aspect that affects Canadians.
And when the Freedom Convoy was going on, and I know a lot of people don't recollect things entirely the same, is that the Conservative Party, who obviously was the opposition party, they were somewhat supportive of the Freedom Convoy. They were with interim party leader Candice Bergen at the time.
Yep.
And the convoy was rolling on, and Candice Bergen was seemingly supportive of the convoy up until a point, and then she flipped a switch and she said, "Okay, we've heard what you had to say. Now go home." Now, we don't see the Liberals or the NDP that are supporting this same thing doing the same thing, saying, "Okay, we've heard what you had to say." And especially, when the first ceasefire was called, Canada called for the ceasefire, the world called for the ceasefire, and 12 seconds after that happened, the ceasefire was over because Gaza fucked it, right? But when they stood up and they said those words like, "Listen, we did what we could. We called for a ceasefire. Now go home." They missed that go home part of the thing, like the Conservatives did with the Freedom Convoy. And because of that, this thing is continuously ramped up and increased in nature and in size. And now we're dealing with a much different situation. Now, on the same token, there's something else that's going on for the month of June, and that's Pride Month. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Pride Month, because I you know what, it's another one of those things that it's not really specific to me. And you know what? It has nothing to do with me. So what is there for me to talk about? I can't personally be offended by other people taking a month to themselves. The month of my birth, February, is there you go, fellow Aquarian maybe, is Black. What is it? Black History Month.
Yeah.
So that goes on. I'm a white guy. I'm married to a black, I have a black wife. We don't talk anything about Black history throughout the month of February, and it is more focused around my birthday, because I'm just that type of person that's going to make it all about me. It's all about me. But I mean, it wasn't it's not a big part of our conversations, but again, I'm not offended by that. I'm not offended by Pride Month. I'm offended by some of the things that the Pride movement has moved out. I'm offended by what's going on inside the school systems. I'm offended by They're the only community that gets to have their flags flown at Parliament, throughout school systems, painted on sidewalks. That offends me. Them having a month and celebrations, not so much. Them having a parade, zero of that offends me. Them showing up with their dinks hanging out in a family situation, that offends me. So, again, not long conversations about that. But what we've seen happening on June 1st, I think it was June 1st or June 2nd. So last Saturday or Sunday when the Pride parades were rolling out, there were a couple of these events that seemed to collide with the let's call them the pro-terrorists. Let's call them the pick a word. Palestine. The pro-Palestine people. I mean,
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what we call people. Somebody's going to be pissed off and offended, and I'm okay with that. So call them pro-terrorists. Call them the Palestinians. The two sides collided because the Palestinians are predominantly, from what my understanding is they're Muslims, and inside of the Muslim faith, and not that I know 1,000% of what it is they really actually don't support gay people. In fact, from what I've heard and what I've seen is that these are the type of people that they would throw off of buildings, or that they would stone to death rather than enjoying their company or trying to see their side of the story. It's pretty cut and dry from Muslims. So when you have a northbound parade of Pride, and you have an eastbound parade of the Palestinians, and they meet at an intersection, there's going to be some conflict. And this is despite the fact that the Pride, the rainbow community has supported the Palestinian thing since this has gone on.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they've all done it. I think there's certainly a sub community that would and has supported, and there's probably an equal or larger amount that calls them out for sort of a naivety of ideas that they would be welcomed in a place like Gaza, where, like you said, gays, homosexuals are persecuted because of their sexual orientation, and that's a tough thing to square when you're protesting in support of an organization that would happily throw you off a roof. The only place, to my knowledge, that you can have a pride parade in the Middle East is Israel, and yet you don't see the same sort of support for them, despite that them being often a refuge for gays, lesbians who are fleeing Hamas persecution to Israel, seeking refuge. And so to have that almost comical counterpoint here in the West that flies in the face of the reality in the Middle East is so typically Canadian and Western. I don't know what it's so naive that there's really no other word for it. It's mind-boggling.
It's placating, hoping that the alligator eats you last, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Cover yourself in steak and jump in the lion den and not hope to get eaten.
And we didn't see a lot of that throughout Canada. I'd seen a couple of these big events throughout the United States, but I think there was one in Winnipeg where things squared off. Do you guys have the same? And I know we're talking Moose Jaw, and I have been to Moose Jaw a few times. But I also know that there are smaller communities that still are fairly active with certain political hot points. So, from your knowledge inside of, let's call it Saskatoon, Regina, even in Moose Jaw, are you guys seeing the same type things? Is the Pride Parade thing, the Pride movement thing moving in? Is the Palestinian thing? Are the groups as large in Saskatchewan?
It hasn't, obviously nowhere near as large as what we're seeing in Eastern Canada. There's been pockets of people who are pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, all across Canada, and Saskatchewan's no exception. I haven't seen anything here in Moose Jaw. There were some swastikas painted in a park, but those got covered up relatively quickly. And
What the hell does swastikas have to do with anything?
well, just in terms of, I guess, anti-Semitic.
Okay, yeah, I guess.
ideology.
Okay, yeah,
But I think Regina, there were people who were setting up at the U of R, and I don't think that really went very far. I haven't heard anything about it, to be honest, beyond what sort of was supposed to be a big protest, and I think kind of just fizzled out. It's seeding time. A lot of people are just busy out in the field or and struggling with multiple jobs or their daily lives. I think there's a bit of a, I don't know, maybe it's the same in Alberta, but people I find are more grounded in reality, that there's certain things that matter and some things that don't. And if you give a lot of attention to some things, like a U of R encampment that are pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, then it's going to turn into something. If you just ignore it, say they're a bunch of morons and carry on, then that just kind of, it fizzles out. It doesn't get any attention. You starve the oxygen from the fire.
yeah. There's a lot of fires that need the oxygen starved from them, and I typically do the same. And you find the same thing in social media, and especially social media. In that if you let people whip themselves into a frenzy, which they usually come into conversations with, and then you send them off into a corner, and then you just kind of poke them every once in a while, see if they're still riled up.
Yeah.
And then you block them or you mute them. Then it's well, for me it's a source of amusement. But I consider myself different than a lot of other people. Me riling folks up is not a big deal. So it's fun, and it's not always for the bad. We try to do the movements that are for the good. I try to organize the people for the right reasons. But every once in a while, you meet that one person that it's like, all right,
Game on.
Let's have some fun with this. No, but I think you're right. If they did the same thing on the University of Calgary campus, and they of course planned it. I'm not going to say that they planned it. It's opportunistic that it's around graduations. If it happened now, as graduations are, I guess starting to come to a close, and they hung out on an empty campus for the next couple of months, they'd fizzle themselves out in the same way that you were saying. The oxygen's gone. There's nobody there that's paying attention to them. So do whatever you want. Starve yourselves. Throw up some more tents. Just make sure you're gone by September, right?
Yeah. Again, the people have a right to protest. It just,
Mhm.
and if they want to camp out on a lawn, and the university isn't going to act on a trespassing rules, then then no one's going to kick them out, but they'll just leave. Just like what was the one protest that it was about the 1%ers or something, and it was the same. Everybody was up in arms, and there was huge protests, and 6 months later, it was gone. That was financially related, not religious or war
Race,
race based. So maybe a little less heated or less committed or commitment from the people that were there. But eventually, all of these are going to settle out. But I think there's been some big damages caused to our social fabric with what we've had going on that we'll see last for a long time.
And I believe that's absolutely correct. What we've seen over the last few years, the division inside of Canada, and I'm not going to say over the last few years. Let's go back to the entire Trudeau regime. As soon as he walked in, he started talking about this anti-Islamic or Islamophobia. That's the word he used. And likes to throw that word around quite a bit. So this Islamophobia thing that really never existed inside of Canada until somebody started talking about it, or systemic racism until that got to be the global topic, which Canadians aren't racist. I mean, we're probably one of the most open people on the planet. And calling us racists is not going to help sort out anything. And that's just like the DEI thing. all you're doing is you're throwing more fuel onto the fire. You're making you're marginalizing people to make them hate outwards, and there's zero good that can come from that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, there's always going to be people who are hateful, idiots, and whether they direct their hate for whatever reason towards people of the Islamic faith, based on if they're Black, Asian, Jewish, that they're always going to exist, and that I don't think you can ever stamp out hate. That's just a human condition that we have to bear. But I agree that I think by focusing and bringing attention to every single difference is creating a problem, in that you are siloing people into groups that are going to have conflict. And I think that's certainly a hallmark of Justin Trudeau's time as the prime minister, is that he's been very calculated in putting people into silos, and definitely aligning people along the lines of race or color or religion or gender. And I think most Canadians, the ones that I associate with anyhow, don't really care about that stuff. It's always been, you live the way you want to live, I'll live the way I want to live. I have no problem with the way that you're living or what you're doing. Let's just coexist. And that, I think, is sort of the Canadian mentality, or has been up to a certain point. And now we're seeing a lot of divisions along those lines that they don't need to be there. And it's certainly I think a forced, a fake forced issue that's presented itself over the last 10 years.
And even inside of this, the people will hate. I don't think people hate as much as they come up with generalities. And it's somewhat of an Occam's razor. It's more of a, the quickest path between 2 points is a straight line. So, and I'm going to give you an example of this. I know when I'm driving wherever inside of the city, and if I see a, what is it, like a 50 plus CAA membership, so a golden, or if I see, I'm not going to say the veterans plates, because I drive with veterans plates, but they're, the old ones with the poppy on them, for Alberta plates. If you're driving behind somebody with one of those plates, you're typically driving behind a senior citizen, and you're going to appreciate that they're probably not going to be watching the top side of their speed as much as they're going to drive in a place that they feel more comfortable. And for me, that's just not conducive to me getting to my destination in a timely fashion. So I don't hate old people. I don't hate veterans.
Yeah.
But I will make that generality. But it's the same thing. I know if there's somebody that's driving, and I can see from the back side of their mirror, if they have like a gold disc or something dangling from their rear view mirror, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to go with 99 times out of 100. That's going to be somebody that's Asian, and that's going to be somebody that's, again, not driving in a fashion that's conducive to me getting to my destination in a timely manner. So I don't hate them as people. I just know the warning signs. And I can extend this even further into, I don't believe that, the police, they say it's racial profiling. I don't think racial profiling for the police is as big of a thing as what most people say. If you dress like a thug, you walk around in dark streets with other people that are dressed like thugs, you can expect to be treated by the police like a fucking thug. And I don't care what the color of your skin is, because I don't think the police care either. If you look like a hood, you're going to be treated like a hood. And that's simply it. So as much as people like to blow up this systemic racism bullshit, and that Canadians are all fucking racists, and especially inside of the province of Alberta, or anywhere in Canada, I don't think it actually exists. Not Not saying that it absolutely doesn't exist. I know there are some ignorant assholes out there that are, simply racist.
Yep.
And you know what? I don't care where you go in the planet. You're going to find the same people. They're just going to be racist
100%.
towards different others, right?
Yep.
But holistically speaking, marginalizing people inside of their communities has been an absolute fucking detriment to them. It gets them to, instead of focus on their own achievements and things that they can actually take pride in, and turns it into something that turns the color of their skin or their community into their source of pride. They stop actually striving for achievement and continue to focus on something that has absolutely no substantial value inside of the rest of the planet.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem with a post-national state ideology is that, if you take away sort of an overarching, sense of what a Canadian is and, the values, and you don't encourage sort of an adoption of those values, and you but you don't encourage people to incorporate into the society that they're joining, and encourage people in Canada to accept and ensure that they're assisting in sort of that adoption of Canadian or Canadiana, however you want to say it. That's where you're going to run into the problems that we're seeing, where, like you said, you end up almost, I don't know, the word isn't coming to me right now, but you're putting everyone back into their own little communities and not incorporating them into the greater fabric of Canada.
And what's amazing about that is and you're a father. Do you have pets?
I do. I have a very dumb Bernedoodle 2-year-old dog.
Okay. No, because people with pets and people with children come to an acceptance in that they have to socialize their children, or they have to socialize their animals. And you learn that pretty quick, because if you have a dog that's around you and you never socialize that dog, and then somebody comes over, they're either shit scared or they can't stop barking.
Yep.
So you socialize your animal with other people. And it's the same thing with your child. If they get too shy around other people, if they're not socialized to either other children or other people, then as soon as they are exposed to that, they're shit scared. So what we're actually doing is we're taking people and putting them inside of these silos instead of breaking them out into a socialization pattern that all humans have understood throughout the pattern of time in socialization. And we're taking people out of those, dropping them into circles and saying, don't talk to those people because they most likely hate you. And they're going to do really bad things or say terrible things about you. And then people are the same way. As soon as they come out into public, they're shit scared. They're looking for a fight. It's not a pattern that can breed anything of a successful nature, from what I believe.
Yeah. I think to a degree, you're right. The idea is that, excuse me, sorry, I was talking like I was saying earlier, I was talking as Ken and Barbie today while I was playing with my little girl. So my throat is getting tired, but yeah, no, I do agree that, that if you wanted to make the analogy that, between our society and socializing, animals to other animals so that there is cohesion when they go to the dog park, I think that's applicable. It'd be nice to see the government run a better dog park.
Well, isn't that it? And the thing about it is we've had our dog park set up for the length of time that Canada's existed, and inside of these dog parks that we have, and I'm going to let's call them public school systems. When my kids were going to school, they still had Christmas concerts. They were still allowed to eat peanut butter up until like grade 5 or something, when they did away with that. Yeah. And when I see what's going on inside of schools now through my, the lens of my grandchildren and through, the lens of my children, who have to deal with this stuff, I can't even believe it. You know,
Yeah,
the school that I grew up in is not exactly the school that they grew up in, but it's no place close to the school that my grandchildren are going to. So we've done a lot of changes inside of our dog park
sure.
to
And I
make.
mean, like schools are interesting because obviously, like, um, my grandparents went to school where there was a rifle range in the basement. The small arms training was a part of the curriculum. Um, when I was in high school, yeah, like you said, you could have peanut butter sandwiches and nobody really batted an eye about it. The kids who had allergies just had to be careful. Um, and yeah, times change, and there needs to be acceptance to some aspects, but you know, the fundamentals of you know creating well adapted and highly educated children to fill positions in society and the workforce should be the primary goal. If we're talking about having a broader social acceptance and knowledge and understanding, I don't think that's a bad thing to an extent. Um, there's a role for schools to play in that to an extent, and I think a lot of that uh, we've saw here in Saskatchewan, anyhow, with sort of the legislation around what educators should be providing to students in terms of um, sex education and around social issues. So, are there things that right now schools are getting wrong? I think so. Are there things that they're getting right? For sure. Nothing's perfect, and the idea that you can be in one camp and not see the other person's side is a part of the problem that I think we're facing across the board on a lot of issues, and education in general is a good bellwether on how we're doing as a society. So,
No, not a terrible thought, but I mean, fundamentally speaking, we're all people. So why does there have to be another side? If you go into a math class, you understand math. You don't understand math as a boy or a girl or a.
wasn't two plus two wasn't 2 plus 2 sexist not too long ago?
No, but what I'm saying, like the fundamental principles inside of early education are based on early education. Their kids are there to learn, the basics. You learn math to see if math is something that you like, so you can then move on to a career. You learn English, you learn social studies, you learn the sciences, basic science, and then before you go into biology or chemistry. And those are the things that are meant to shape your career. So, I mean, those are the paths that you walk along on. And there's no gender specific chemistry. There's no gender specific mathematical principles. It doesn't matter who you are. So show up and learn the subjects that are being taught to you. And instead of focusing on sexualization, because kids are going to figure it out, we all have. It's been happening for
millennia.
Yeah. Since we've been on the planet, people have been able to figure out tab A goes into slot B. We don't need that as a part of our education system. What we need is to advance our education system, to progress our education system. I believe that kids have the capacity to be smarter today than they were in my time, because I believe we have tools and exposure to things like computers and mass communication that we didn't have in my day. Rolling around a bicycle tire with a stick is not on the same place as what kids are exposed to by way of tablets, gaming systems, computers, and cell phones. So I believe that the capacity here is so much greater that we can excel our children so much faster. And yet the product that we're seeing isn't there. We've taken all the best tools, all the best principles, all the best fundamentals, and the product that it's spitting out is embarrassingly terrible. And I'm not saying that all kids are bad. They are, but I'm not saying that. they're filthy. They smell funny. They don't comb their hair. They're never on time. I'm a grandfather. Let it go. But at the same time, I mean, we were all kids, and when I see the advantages, when I see the advantages that I gave to my children, though they didn't do as great as I'd hoped that they would have done with them, they at least got the fundamentals of the ideas down. Like we were in the early PC generation. My kids were the first kids in their school to have cell phones. My youngest boy was in grade 3, my oldest in grade 6. Long story, but I had a deal with one of the cellular companies, and I was buying massive amounts of cell phones. And to get them on a pay-go plan was really nothing. And I ran a business, so even incorporating them into that. The rest of the parents inside of the schools, as soon as they seen that our children had them, they had to get their children them. And then all of the other parents stopped talking to me when they started getting their cell phone bills from their children, which I can completely appreciate because I've gotten some of those too. And it's terrible. Anyways, what I'm saying is that I'd always wanted to keep my kids up with the latest and the greatest on tools. My wife wanted to keep them the latest and the greatest in the fashions of things. We kind of butted heads on that. We didn't have all the same agreements. Did they do better with some of the tools that they were afforded than, what I did without them? I'm going to say they absolutely did. Kids these days, I think that the more tools that they've been given, the worse off they actually are. I don't think they have the same sort of creativity and imagination and the desires that, people that like me rolled around a bicycle tire with a stick. Really, I don't think they get the same thing.
Yeah. I'm guilty of using my phone to assist my middle-aged brain to accomplish tasks. I always joke that because I went to school in Saskatchewan, my math is less than ideal. And certainly when it comes to my 7-year-old, he's more than up to the challenge for doing the simple math that sometimes I go to the calculator for. So I don't know. I think it's a matter of, there's benefits to the technology, but I do think that there is to an extent a lack of that creativity that you get from not having to be able to rely on computers or phones.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, you rely on your phone for doing math. I map myself everywhere. I know the city like the back of my hand.
Yep.
But I don't go any place without throwing my maps on my phone because I don't know what construction looks like any place. And you get caught in construction a couple of times and it's like, fuck this. I'm mapping everything. It's like
I did my driving test in Kindersley, which at the time I think had 3 stoplights, and they were on the main drag. And the idea of driving, I'd been driving on the farm for, I don't know, since I was 10 or younger. But the idea of going through stoplights and making turns and having to wait for other people was terrifying. And the GPS on a phone was the best invention because it's always been anxiety causing to drive in a city for me, having grown up in the country. And yeah, I'm the same as you. If I want to go anywhere, the GPS.
Map it. That's it. Okay, so moving along in the conversation, the reason that we really kind of got onto this thing, we're like an hour in and we haven't even got to the focus of the conversation.
Yeah.
I told you this goes fast, right? Like I
Mhm.
told you that, we just fall into conversation. This goes rather quickly. So in the House of Commons, in Parliament right now, we just recently learned again that, there's some MPs that have allegedly been compromised by foreign bodies. And they keep throwing Russia into the mix, but Russia is absolutely 100% not a part of this. Would you agree with that?
I guess they're probably there somewhere in the mix. You can't. What was it? Jeffrey Delisle, 2013 Navy sub-lieutenant or captain, captain equivalent rank anyhow, sold secrets to the GRU, Navy top secret. So is it current to today? Probably not. I think the big focus is China and India.
And that's perfect. And I think they like to keep dragging Russia into this so that they can keep stoking the Ukrainian-Russia war to keep giving out more money to the Ukraine. Which, by the way, I don't know if you'd seen that story that came out, was it like Monday? Where Zelensky paid $200 million for a casino hotel, like some luxury casino and hotel in like Cyprus. Did you see
No, I
that?
didn't see that. No.
Yeah,
It's
no. So
like a McKinsey contract.
yeah, no, it's 100% like the $200 million, and he bought himself his own luxury hotel and casino, and he's coming back crying for more money. Like the audacity of this prick. I'm Ukrainian, by the way.
Oh,
You're in Saskatchewan. You're around a lot of other bohunks, so I get that. But watching that is just an absolute embarrassing shame. Anyways, I didn't want to go too much off on the Russia thing. I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't a part of the conversation. I mean, it's predominantly India, and now that Trudeau is out with India, it's basically all 100% China, right? Like that's what the big focus is
is the
China.
PRC. Yeah.
Is the PRC, yeah.
Yeah. And it really is like in terms of like I haven't been able to comment on politics for the past 20 years because I was in the CAF and you have to be nonpartisan while you're a member, and there's rules against speaking out against the government, so forth. But this is really something that I haven't seen ever. I don't know when the last time we saw something this scandalous in the country was. Like
that wasn't on TV.
No,
that wasn't. Yeah, like you don't even see this in like a lot of the storylines that we're seeing in movies and shit. Like what we're seeing right now.
For sure. Yeah. It is. It's quite incredible, and yeah, it's almost hard to wrap your head around that. We have elected members or non-elected if they're in the Senate who are involved that are collaborating with foreign powers and not just taking bribes, but providing allegedly information to these foreign agent actors about their colleagues in the House of Commons or in the Senate, their positions on certain activities, which are going to enable those hostile players to take better affiliated action against these individuals or against Canada's best interests. It's mind-boggling.
And see, that's part of the reason that I wanted to have you on the call, and especially with your experience, because you've been CAF for 20 years. So you understand a little bit more about by way of strategy than I'm going to say what I would understand, or maybe what other people understand. And again, you being military, you have to see everything through a basically gray lens. Whereas now that you're out, now that the sun is shining on this, you get a whole different light.
Yeah.
And the outsider perspective is one thing, but the second thing is that you do have some military experience, which means you understand the strategy behind it, right?
Honestly, not huge on the strategy side. I'm not going to say that I was, but when you watch something interesting that I observed when I was in the military was like I saw when I started serving, I was underneath a Liberal Prime Minister, John Chrétien, and then Stephen Harper, and then Justin Trudeau. So, my career was split fairly evenly between both governments. And, you could see the flavor, the way that the organizations, public servants, officers, and the leadership all acted. And so you kind of got used to seeing the ebb and flow and wave of how the politics affected the CAF. And this isn't necessarily strategy. It's just the observations having been forced to watch, if that makes sense.
No, it does, because you're in a situational awareness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just kind of adapt situationally to that, which is totally acceptable. I mean, we all do the same thing. If you're going out to McDonald's, you're fine to maybe scratch yourself while you're standing in line waiting to order or pick up your cheeseburger. Whereas if you're at, let's call it the Kegs or Ruth's Chris, probably not going to conduct yourself in the same manner, maybe dress up a little bit nicer. Again, situational awareness, right?
Yeah.
Not much different. No, but on the strategy side of things, and this is what I guess I struggle with it the most is like, what the fuck does China want to do with Canada, anyways? I mean, sure, we buy a lot of their shit and we can have some trade negotiations and stuff with them. But fundamentally speaking, why would a spy pay like an MP of some small Ontario riding or sponsor them? Or like, what fucking information could these people actually provide back to the People's Republic of China?
Yeah, I think Sam Cooper has done a lot of good work on the background. I think on why PRC and India and other countries want to work so diligently to undermine Canada. We're a middle power, albeit probably a decreasing middle power on the world stage. And if you've got Canada in a position where you can have these. Even if they're a backbench MP or a senator working to advance either a goal that's going to benefit China or not necessarily harm China or whatever state it may be, that's the goal. So, I think part of the NCI COP report was that even the media have been influenced by foreign actors who are having the narrative shaped in a way that is more beneficial to either the PRC or India or whoever. And that's the goal. Is it doesn't have to be a monumental, and it probably would never be a monumental impact. It would be that gradual shift in the narrative away from something that, say, is super scandalous, which I think would count the election interference that was broke national news wise in 2022. It disappeared. So after that initial sort of spike in interest, you saw that slide off the map. Occasionally, some people would fluff the story back up to the top of the news pile, but for the most part, until recently, foreign interference has been, relegated to the back burner of most news outlets' stories, and that's the influence I think that the PRC and other countries are trying to achieve, because if you're not drawing attention to that small detail, then all that little work, the votes against, say a trade deal that doesn't benefit China, or a sanction against someone helps them in a trade deal in Afghanistan. It's the little things that I think they're working at through our compromised MPs and senators that they're achieving, and that's the aim. It's the small things,
Nuances.
the nuances.
Yeah. A slow trickle can change a rock formation over a period of time.
1,000%.
Whereas if it's a big geyser, somebody's going to look to impact change on that, right?
Yeah.
So that makes sense. So now this is something that we know is happening. Now they said that there's a few MPs. Now they don't specify liberal, but I think we're all of the mind that if it was conservative MPs, we'd already know their names, right?
It's really weird. Like I honestly thought when this first came out that for sure. I mean, obviously the Han Dong was identified as sort of a real person of interest in the initial interference election stories, and that, like I said, it kind of faded away. But some of the information in the report, does point fingers towards conservative or CPC aligned members. And at this point, I've said on my X feed that I don't really care whether they're liberals or conservatives or NDP or Green or whoever. I just want them named. And it's funny because there's so many people who share that opinion, but there are also people who, and the majority of them being MPs, that feel like there's a reason to protect these traders. And I can see how, from a security standpoint, you might not want to say expose someone that you could flip to work against those who've been working against Canada's interests. But at the same time, the electorate should know who they're voting for and who is working against them. Like, there's no reason that they should be rewarded come next election by being allowed to sit on a ballot. The party leaders should need to kick them out of their caucuses, and the RCMP needs to investigate. Like, they need to be named. And I think it was Norman Spector on X who said that the opposition parties would be foolish to let the RCMP get their hands on this, because at least before they're named, because once it's buried in the RCMP, the government and everybody will just say, well, it's undergoing an investigation and we can't comment. And before you know it, the 2025 election is here and we still don't have names, and then you're voting for people you don't know who may be compromised.
No, and that's and I see that being true. It's not like the RCMP moves really fast on any of these things. We're still not at the bottom of the Jody Wilson-Raybould thing.
Yep. Yeah.
So that totally makes sense. And I mean, a big part of what I think Canadians, what we're all kind of accustomed to, is law and order type justice, where inside of an hour we can see somebody get murdered or somebody get raped. And, we don't realize the span of time, even though it says, it's like January when this happened, June when they're going through the investigation. You see the seasonal changes, but nobody appreciates the actual span of time that kind of goes on inside of these investigations. Whereas we sit for an hour and we go from murder to conclusion inside of that hour. So, I mean, there's a big part of that the time appreciation. And having worked for a couple of national companies and a couple of manufacturers, the one thing that people like me get to or have been blessed with is the understanding. I'm not going to say I'm a patient person, because I'm not. I'm not a patient person, but I understand that there is a process that this all goes through. Whereas I think we all want a more quick resolve. A quick resolve, like it was basically the Sunday night before February 14th, before Valentine's Day in 2022. Sunday night, an emergency meeting was called. Monday morning, the stormtroopers were rolling on the Freedom Convoy inside of Ottawa. That's the kind of resolve that I think a lot of Canadians are looking or expecting inside of these things. But the people that are being investigated are doing the investigations themselves. They're the ones that are stalling these things. And they were the ones that were also manning the troops throughout the Freedom Convoy. So we're not going to see the same timeline. We're not going to see the same impact, the same resolute that we'd seen, in 2022. It's just not going to be the same. And yes, there is 500 and some odd days to the next election. But with an RCMP investigation, if it started today, would it be concluded by the next election? And that's not something that I think anybody can answer.
No, well, and especially if all of a sudden, for whatever reason, there's a non-confidence motion and we go to a snap election, the odds of there being a complete investigation before that is next to zero. So, I think
what's the odd? What are the odds of a snap election? What Jagmeet has sat by and been sandbagged. Like, his two big things for his supply and confidence portion of the supply and confidence deal with Liberals were the dental care and pharmacare, right?
Yep.
Both of those things were introduced to the House of Commons. Both of those are bills by Liberals. So he literally shows zero accomplishments. He can say that those were done by the NDP, but they weren't. They were done literally by the Liberals. They're Liberal bills. They were passed with support from the NDP, but he's literally got zero accomplishments throughout this supply and confidence deal. And even on the pharmacare side of things, the weakest fucking pharmacare thing that I've ever seen in my life, birth control pills and diabetic drugs. Now, Jag claims that there's 9 million Canadians that are going to get birth control pills because of this. It's false. These programs actually already exist inside of Canada, inside of the different provinces where they're being provided already. You're not providing more birth control pills. You're not getting the supersized birth control pills to teenagers, right?
Yeah.
They're getting the same shit anyways. And for the people that already have health insurance on the diabetic meds, they're getting nothing special. There's only so much insulin that you can take. There's only so much metformin that your body will process, or Ozempic, or whatever the fuck they're doing right now for the treatments. I mean, I understand the situation behind it. I just don't know what doctors are doing specifically, or what meds specifically are included under the pharmacare deal. But if it's diabetic supplies, it's what the testing strips,
Yep.
insulin, metformin, like the very basics.
Yeah.
Because inside of diabetes, it's a metabolic condition that's caused by consumption, and it's not exclusive. So I'm not going to say all diabetics, but a lot of diabetics that are taking insulin or that need metformin, they're also on like 6 to 8 other medications, but those aren't specific to diabetes, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to get back to your question about do I think there's going to be a snap election? I don't think so. Jagmeet Singh has had plenty of opportunity to take the government to account with a non-confidence vote, and he's proven time and time again that he won't. I think he's in it for the long haul, and unfortunately for the NDP, I think that they are going to suffer in the next election. I mean, Jagmeet Singh is more interested in campaigning against Galen Weston than he is advancing anything that's going to be of substantial benefit to Canadians, or holding the government to account. He's very fond of going off and sounding off against anything that Justin Trudeau does that he doesn't agree with, but then he'll vote for it the very same week and call it an NDP victory somehow. So the man is, and the fact that he has adopted this very unusual tactic of saying, when I'm prime minister, which, I mean, I have as much chance of becoming prime minister as Jagmeet Singh does. Not a federal politician. So
I have as much chance in winning his riding as he does in the next election.
100%. And I haven't checked the polls lately, but I don't even think his riding is that safe anymore. So yeah, at Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, I think they're in a world of hurt in terms of politics. And so I guess to circle back, no, I don't think there'll be a snap election. I think this is going to run its course. And then the second part of that was having to do with the naming of the conspirators. I don't think we'll see the names. I think we should. But I think that, and this is what I wanted to get back to now, was that it's weird that Poilievre didn't jump down the Liberals' throats in the House of Commons when it came up in question, or when he had the opportunity to bring it up in question period. And I was shocked that he didn't, because that seemed like a no-brainer, and that leads me to believe that the CPC have just as big a problem as the Liberal Party in terms of people who are potentially compromised, and all the more reason why when Canada's two largest parties are keeping mum on this report, that they need to be named. It just, rip the Band-Aid off, expose it to sunlight, cut the rod out of the affected part of the House of Commons, and you carry on.
Do you think Poilievre actually knows who these compromised individuals are?
I don't know, honestly. I think that there's probably a strong likelihood that he has an idea, but whether or not he's got the info to, I'll say this: if he has the info and he hasn't outed those members from his caucus, then he is going to suffer a worse wrath from Conservatives than O'Toole did when he backtracked on the carbon tax. It'll be blood sport.
No, and I'd say you're probably right. The whole thing is that it comes down to this, the NDA, the security clearance and the NDA. So everybody calls it, or not everybody, the liberals are all stoking this. Well, Polyev is afraid to go to get his security clearance, or he can't get a security clearance. When in actuality is, if he does get the security clearance and he does get this documentation, he's every bit as hushed as not having the information anyways.
Yeah, and
Right?
I don't think that's the case, and it's fuzzy because you see it from both sides. The Because he was, if I'm not mistaken, Privy Council before, so he would have the security clearance required to do that. I don't think he's attending these briefs because he didn't. There was a caveat in that if he attended, then he couldn't talk about them, and I think he wanted to leave an avenue open to do so down the road. So
that's actually false. And
yeah.
that clip I tried to queue up when we were trying to get things going.
Yep.
That was basically the part
Okay.
that it came down to, and I can't remember the gal's name here. Let me just pull the screen up.
Mercedes?
And I don't know what her name is. I don't watch news. Vasi Kapelis.
Yeah.
So yeah, on Power Play. And she brought up that exact same thing, to where the Conservative MP literally had to respond to it and basically said what I said.
Okay.
So it's this thing where Trudeau's made it so that if you do get the information, you can't talk about it. But if you don't get your security clearance, you don't get the information, which means you can't talk about it. So it can only ever be speculation. So I think that, and the way I'd see this is they said that originally who reported it wasn't the National Post. It was whoever. They said that there was 11 MPs that were involved in this clandestine, blah, 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 whatever. And they indicated that it was a majority of liberals, but they did say that there was a conservative that was involved in this. So I'm not sure if Polyev is afraid that quite possibly one of the conservatives are involved in this, which he's going to have to deal with. And it's better to be proactive on that, like you said, than reactive when he finds out. But I mean, at this point, he can basically go off the fact that I didn't know. What was I supposed to do?
Yeah, and I think that probably won't play well either. Ignorance isn't an excuse when you're a leader who is championing against a government that is often feigned ignorance on several files, or says that he's a common sense conservative. Like he's painted himself in a corner where he needs to walk his talk, and if he doesn't, then he's gonna have there'll be some hell to pay.
Well, and there's the other military strategy, and I'm paraphrasing, but it goes along the lines of don't step in front of your enemy if he's already defeating himself. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake.
That's right. Yeah, whatever it is. I mean, throw it however you want. Polyev at this point, and I've said this for months, if he just sat back, and I said the same thing about Aaron O'Toole, all you have to be is not fucking crazy, and O'Toole couldn't pull it off. Polyev, same thing. All you have to do is nothing. Let them burn their own house down. They're capable of doing it.
What's the saying? I've heard circulated lots. It's Canadians don't elect in governments, they vote out governments.
That's right.
You don't have to, at this point, just not being the Liberals is enough likely to get you into the seat of power.
Unless your name is Maxime Bernier.
Or any seat in that case. But, it's.
I'm going to lose followers from that. I have a lot of PPC
supporters. My apologies.
No. And you know what? There's going to be a time when we all have to come to that conversation as well. Max has said some things. I really have, with the exception of saying that he's a bit of a lunatic and that he blocks people like me instead of having conversations. I don't have a lot of terrible things to say about Max, except for the fact that he's fucking unelectable. And the people that are attracted to his party, and I'm not going to say all the people that are attracted to his party, but I'm going to say that there are some of the people, and I have seen some of the people that have ran for seats under the PPC banner that are straight up fucking lunatics. They're completely nuts.
Or implicated in an arrive scam. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't really know what to say. I mean, I think the PPC had potential when they came out the gate, and then they blew it all. But they're hanging around. We'll see. There's nothing to say. Like, they've got a good base of supporters, and I mean, that's more than the Greens can say.
No, that's absolutely right. And I think if they grow this thing organically instead of trying to push the envelope, I think that they can have seats, not by 2025, but I think in the following elections, they do have the potential to swing some seats. And there's going to be a lot of hostility if a conservative government does form, even in a supermajority, because there's going to be a lot of reckoning that needs to be done on the economic situation that the Liberals have put us in over the last 2 years. No, I'm not even going to go back to COVID, just over the last 2 years and what Freeland is forecasting for next year, right?
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up Bernier, because something that I've said before is that, Justin Trudeau is a populist leader. Like, the party is him. He is the party. And the same is true of Poilievre. Right now, the Conservatives are doing very well because of Poilievre, and it was the same as the Liberals in 2015 with Trudeau, that they rode to power on his coattails, and the Conservatives right now are going to do the same with Poilievre. And when you make the leader the identity of the party, and that's the focus, no difference than Max Bernier. Max Bernier is the PPC, and that's why they haven't had a leadership contest. So all of the parties, aside from the Greens, who can't organize or keep a leader in
sober.
Yeah, that too.
Let's talk about environmental racism for zero time.
No, let's not.
Exactly. No, I mean, Elizabeth May, come on, sober up.
But like, what I'm saying is that
yeah.
Our leaders in politics, it's not so much about the party stance, it's about the leaders. And I'd like to see us get away from that to an extent. And I don't know if it's possible, because it's always about the leader in the end. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. If the Conservatives get a supermajority, wow, like there'll be no need for OICs to accomplish political missions like the Trudeau government does. There'd be no need to convince the NDP to vote in confidence on a budget. With a supermajority, sky's the limit. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, I mean, Bloc seems to be holding steady. The NDP, they're not gaining any traction on the federal level, but they're not losing anymore either. They're still
16%. I think it was the last one I saw them at.
Yeah, but I mean, that's 16% over the last 2 years, though, right?
Yeah.
And so again, that's where they're basically holding. They're holding flat at that. Will the Bloc, the NDP, and the Greens and the Liberals have enough to stop the supermajority if it's an actual true supermajority? It's a tough say. I mean, everything's still up in the air right now. And there was some votes that were swung on 338 Canada over, what was it? I don't know if it was the abortion thing. It certainly wasn't the fucking budget that the Liberals rolled out. But there was a bit of a shift in the matrix over the last couple of weeks.
Oh, I haven't seen anything drastic. I can't say to one way or another on that. I just know that right now that the trajectory is that pretty much regardless of a complete disaster, the Conservatives are going to be forming the next government, and Poilievre will be the next prime minister, and it's going to be a hefty majority. And I mean, knock on wood, if that's your thing, or if you're not a PP or a CPC supporter, then whatever, right? Like
Whatever it takes, man.
honestly, for me, like I've got in my bio, like I'm politically homeless. I'd love to see the NDP do better because I have NDP ties through my grandparents, and I've leaned conservative in the past. I'd like to see conservative or the Liberals back sort of in the realm of the Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin sort of fiscally responsible stage. So, and in the end, I'm going to write about them all sort of the same anyhow. So for me, it matters, but in terms of what I do as an opinion columnist, it's not going to make a difference. They're all going to get roasted if they're doing something stupid.
No, and you're absolutely right. I think what needs to happen is I mean, we have our political spectrum that's like, let's go to where my camera can actually make out my hands. It's like this wide, and what we need to do is we need to bring it back in, right? The left with progressive ideologies has expanded the metrics, and from that there's been a conservative reaction where ultra, whatever they call them, the far rights, and I think the far rights are a fringe minority, and nobody can convince me otherwise. There is, and again, it's along the same lines of racism inside of Canada. Sure, it does exist to a point where it's of any great significance. I don't believe so. In the same way that I don't believe that the far right ideology is anywhere near what the far left, which is the progressive left, has become. They're not the same. You can't fold it up and make an even book. But along those lines, yeah, we need to rein in these things a lot more. Come closer to what people are looking for instead of what ideologies are actually professing. And I don't want to get into the conspiracy theories of the WEF or whatever, because I mean, we could go on for like 28 hours on that shit and never really come to any conclusions. But I do agree with you. We got to bring it in closer. What the fuck is it about the NDP? Family ties or not? What could you see that you'd want to see more of in the NDP? They're the Union Party. Like what?
Strictly nostalgic.
Sorry, I'm not trying to roast you. It's your first podcast, first time we've really met, and here I am. I'm coming down.
Well, it's a good conversation. I'm totally fine to sit here and take that because it's fair, and it's strictly, it is sentimental. I think that in the past there was if you look at the history of the NDP and how it came out of the CCF and being a sort of a prairie oriented party, there's a soft spot for me there. I think it's primarily sentimental. Would I vote for Jagmeet Singh and the NDP that exists today? Not until they got their anti-Semitism problem under check, and they'd need to have they'd probably need to have a new leader in terms of someone who doesn't necessarily think they're going to be prime minister, but who could hold the seat of opposition and hold the government to account in a responsible manner. That I think if the NDP focused on that, they'd probably do fairly well.
They do need a new leader. Like after Jagmeet loses this next election and loses seats in this next election, he should literally lose his seat. There's no question about it. He should go through the same thing that Rachel Notley went through for the province of Alberta.
Yeah,
you're unelectable now. You can't win. Doesn't matter how much money we throw behind you. Doesn't matter how much money the unions, I'm going to say that, the unions throw behind them. They're unelectable.
People, I mean, the parties usually have it as a seat metric. Like if you win so many seats or you lose or you project this, but you don't perform, then that's the way out. But, I don't see the NDP coming up with any big advances in the next election. And I don't think that Jagmeet Singh is providing any real substantive reason for Canadians to move to the NDP. The grocery thing is a one-trick pony. And, when you start talking about price control in groceries, you're only a step away from bread lines. I think he's done after the next election. And I don't know in that caucus who there would be to replace him. So I think we'll see the party probably struggle for the next little while.
Well, we even see that inside of the province of Alberta, because now that Lantley stepped down, I'm not going to say Naheed Nenshi, who basically won his first election by stating he was conservative, which he never was, is now running for provincial leadership for the specific reason is that the rest of that party is a party of losers. Like, they're just, if they're not the most horrific people on the planet, they're complete fucking dullards. Just terrible, just a terrible party. And if you look at the federal NDP, they're not much better. We got that one gal in Edmonton. What the fuck's her name? I can't remember. Everything that she's covered for the last 7 months. And there's like literally on the federal side of things inside of Alberta, there's 2 federal NDPs, one in Edmonton, one in Calgary, and there's 2 Liberals, one in Calgary and one in Edmonton, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Something along those lines. Anyway, she's the NDP Liberal, the NDP federal MP in Edmonton. And since October, she's done nothing but cover the whole support Palestine thing.
Like Heather McPherson.
Yeah, that's it, Heather McPherson.
Yeah.
And Edmonton's on fire. Like, Edmonton's not doing well, man. It's pretty bad there now. Like, you know, I don't go to Edmonton much, and you know, I was born in Edmonton. So again, I say to everybody, Edmonton will always have a special place in my heart. Calgary will always be home. But Edmonton is, I mean, we used to love going to Edmonton in the summertime. You know, they had I'm not going to call it the blue collar side of things. They just knew how to party. You know, you go down there for the Fringe Fest. You go down up. If you go up to the Fringe Fest, if you go up for the Taste of Edmonton, you go up for like the Street Fest. Edmonton outdid Calgary in so many ways. Since they went woke, the Eskimos are now the Elks.
Elks, yeah.
And they can't give away the fucking seats. The Oilers are their only saving grace right now. Klondike Days doesn't even have an identity anymore. I don't even know what capital X or I don't even know what they call the exhibition there now.
It's not Klondike Days anymore?
No, it went from Klondike Days to K Days to capital X. They've changed it so many times, and the numbers that they get through the gates there now are just pathetic. K Days used to be amazing. It was never as great as Calgary, because Calgary was always the biggest stampede in the world, right?
Yeah.
But it was better, you know, and people dressed up in the garb, you know, the period clothing from the Klondike. They had the whole gold rush shit going on, and it had a theme. Now that it's capital X, whatever they call it, it's just like, it's a dump and nobody goes there. And it's the same Conklin Midway that we've seen for, you know, last time. Like, fuck, they haven't introduced a ride since I actually went on a ride, and that was like 40 years ago. Same thing for Calgary, though. I mean, it's the same Midway. They just needed to have a theme around it, and they just needed to be consistent with it, but they fucked that too. So between that, the downtown core is a complete shithole. The C train or the LRT there, I don't think they've got it fixed, but you could literally walk faster beside the LRT and get to your destination quicker than the extension they've spent millions of dollars on. The busing system, they bought all those electronic buses, or the EV buses, right?
Yeah.
And there's like 80 of those fucking things that are parked now because they're unrepairable. They're out of warranty, and the company that manufactured them got sold off. Like, the whole city is swirling the drain pipe, and it's sad because, again, all the great times that were available in Edmonton, all the great people that supported all of that, it's all gone. They've turned it into a liberal light shithole. Tent cities, hobos, drug addicts. There are some redeeming qualities in Edmonton. Stanici's sausage, it's over on 118th Ave. I'll give them a shout out because Stanici's Mundare sausage. I mean, it's the shit, right? But
my only experience in Edmonton was training to work up and go to Afghanistan. We departed from there, Task Force 309. So my experience of Edmonton is limited to the base, which is nothing to write home about. And I guess the base has the old secondary landing site for the space shuttle. I don't know if you knew that. I
did not know that.
Yeah, there's a large runway on the base proper, and it was, I think, the secondary site for if the shuttle needed to land somewhere. That was the spot.
Okay.
And we would run down it, and it was a never-ending run. So that's the limit of my Edmonton experience is running on an old space shuttle landing field.
Yeah. And again, I'm not going to say Edmonton's a terrible place. I'm not going to say Edmontonians are terrible people. They've adopted a philosophy that hasn't done well for the city, and it's basically shown them the kindness in return. That's what I'm saying. It's swirling the drain. Calgary's not looking that much better right now. We have a city council in place that's not really counseling for the city. There's no. I don't believe there's.
The approval polls were not good.
Yeah, 12% for the mayor.
Yeah, not great.
She could stay home until the next election. She would do better than if she showed up anyplace. I'm going to say if she stayed home until the next municipal election, she could probably get it back up to about 25 points. If she keeps doing what she's doing, she'll be down to like 6. I don't think she's going to run again. There's no way.
Well,
but
that's the question everyone's asking about Justin Trudeau too.
No, my forecast is, and I have had a little bit of insider insight on this.
Oh.
And I can't say by who,
obviously.
But he's actually already been selected for another position. But I knew that 5 months ago. So he's actually already got that. They've already worked on his exit strategy, and his exit strategy right now is to say that he's not going to continue, or he's going to continue to run for the Liberal Party. He's literally, again, like one of these people that is the shining star of the Liberal eye. He can raise funds with his name on there, but he's basically burnt the party to the ground. They just don't have anybody else, save Mark Carney, that can step into the role, right? Now, what they're going to need to do is they're going to need to get him the fuck out. That's going to happen sometime between now and September. And the reason I say that is because they can hold their leadership for the Liberal or the Federal Liberal Party for the next year. That leadership race will be a campaign, a year-long campaign for the Liberals, where they can't run on their actual track record. So sometime between now and I'm going to say, mid to end September, Justin Trudeau is going to step down. They're going to have the leadership race. That leadership race is going to turn into a campaign. We're going to see 12 months of this shit leading into the 2025 elections. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't see anything sort of out of sorts with that. It may be a bit trickier now with this shitstorm that the foreign interference story has brought, because I think there's going to be long legs in terms of damage if his hand is forced on having to name MPs. But if it doesn't have to and it comes out of the news cycle, then you're right. I think it'll probably be to the detriment of the Conservatives, because they'll be able, like you said, run that leadership campaign as a election campaign under the guise of a leadership race.
Well, and I mean, it got them 0, but the quarter percentage drop in the BOC rates today, right?
4.75, I think.
What's that?
Was it 4.75 it's down to?
Yeah, they dropped it by 0.25%. Right? Yeah, so it's now 4.5% or 4.75% instead of 5%. So they dropped it 0.25%. And Freeland made it out to be like this big deal, but it got like literally zero. Like, I don't think anybody heard of it.
Yeah.
Nothing. We all seen the news at what, like 6:30 this morning, 6:30 this morning. Okay, big deal. The people that are struggling right now, that 0.25% is going to do fucking nothing for them. The people that are trying to buy a house right now, that 0.25% is going to do nothing for them. Housing is still in supply, and people are still losing their asses. So, I mean, that's really a nothing burger. It's a huge nothing burger. And what it's going to do is it's going to raise inflation over the next few months. We all know that, right? They're out of control spending with a 0.25% off the BOC. It should have actually probably went up a 0.25% to a 0.5%, but that would completely collapse more housing or increase insolvencies, whatever. People losing their houses, people losing everything. There's no way out of this. What they did was I'm not even going to say it was politically motivated. Tiff just didn't want to get the flack anymore. He drops it a 0.25%. And Freeland has something to boast about. But it's a nothing burger. And Trudeau, call it taking his exit stage left because of the scandal or because of I want to take more time with my family or, whatever it is. It's still going to poise itself in around September. He's got the summer, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to change anything. Because like you said, the investigations are going to take too much time to progress before anything's even going to come out of that. Now, here's a question for you, though.
Okay.
Do you think he's one of them?
I don't know. Honestly, in my heart of hearts, I hope not. And that's just because I don't want Canada to have a compromised prime minister on its history books. Whether I agree with the man and his policies, I can say that I don't want the position to be impacted with that sort of stain. Is he? I honestly don't know. I mean, his reluctance to act on the first sort of reports of foreign interference and 11 members being compromised is pretty suspect. But I'm not going to go so far as to say that he's one of them. No more than I would say that Poilievre is one of them. Has he made bad decisions about it? For sure. And are his members impacted? Definitely. But is he himself? I don't think so. A patsy, 100%, but not a willing participant.
I think I definitely think that he's a patsy. No, and there's 10 out of 10. But I mean, there's no question that the PRC helped him get elected. Like 80% of his elections funds.
Yeah, the donations coming from Vancouver in 2015.
Coming in from Vancouver with all Chinese names, 80% of them.
Super sketchy.
There's nobody on the planet that believes that wasn't a handshake deal, a backroom deal. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
So what did China get for that deal? And we don't know. We don't know entirely. We know.
We may never. I mean, yeah. I think, and that's, we need the names. I'll say that until I'm blue in the face. Short of anything else that happens, that's the names need to be released. They need to be made public. I could write 1,000 columns and just say the same thing. Just hashtag name the names.
Leo Housakis, Senator Leo Housakis. I love. Do you watch him in Senate?
Yeah. Very good.
I love Leo Housakis. That's his thing. Give us the names, or what did he say? Because I quoted the exact same thing. What was it?
Michael Chong, I think, said the same thing in the comments today.
Yeah. And I mean, I personally think that the political thing that we have going on now, which is the same political thing that we've had going on for years, the viewing of the House of Commons and the different Senate boards and stuff, I think the Liberals have literally destroyed that with the amount of scandals that they've had. And all it does is serve to piss people off right now. So like I even said, we got to do away with question period. And instead of having question period, just move right into waterboarding these motherfuckers. Because nobody can sit through this intolerable bullshit anymore. Release the names is what
unwatchable.
Yeah, Leo Husaka said, and I quoted the exact same thing. And I mean, I think we're all on the same page. We all want to know the names. Name the names. And will we ever get to know them? Who knows? I think the Liberals, again, this is one of those things. If your enemy is already harming themselves, why get in the way? Listen, man, you know what? We're coming up pretty close to 2 hours here. It's been a really great conversation. I've loved having you on for a chat. Final thoughts before we close out for the evening. Like, what do you think we're looking at into the next short period of time as Canadians? What do you think we should be looking out for?
I think we're still. Personally, I think the rise in anti-Semitism for me is going to be the big one. The foreign interference is going to fizzle out. I think the same way that most scandals do. It's going to get lost in the bureaucracy and the politics of the day-to-day sort of Ottawa slog.
Malaise.
Yeah, malaise will 100% sit in again on this, even though it shouldn't. But I think the big thing and the most critical story right now that Canadians need to be cognizant of and watching is that rise in anti-Semitism, because it is just a matter of time with school shootings happening more frequently, fire bombings. It's unfortunately probably going to be just a matter of time until we see some deaths. And then, regrettably so, that were likely preventable had people taken a strong stance on the violence and the hate that we're seeing in the streets. And I think that's probably where, if we're looking at the big picture of Canada as a whole, that's the focus. The foreign interference being the second thing, and then, yeah, God knows, fire season, I suppose, what's coming up.
Well, you completely missed out bird flu, and we never did take a minute to talk about
too late for that.
H5N2, new variant that's just leaked. Wasn't the first case in Saskatchewan too? Some farmer in Saskatchewan. I don't know. That's going to be something that the Americans have to battle through for the Trump-Biden election, and that's not a conversation I'm willing to get into because, again, not my problem. I think Trump would be better for Canada than Biden has been, but at the same time,
maybe a topic for another live stream.
Yeah, topic. We'll have to do a big round table on the whole Trump Biden thing before, as shit's going through the debates. That would be classic. That'd be a good time. All right. Well, John, I want to thank you again for taking some time. Again, short notice, just to have a political knockdown on what we're seeing inside of the country, and especially what we've seen over the last week. So, yeah, thanks for coming out. I do want to take a quick second and thank everybody that's taken some time to sit and listen to me prattle on ungraciously while I've tried to host somebody again in one of my live streams. I'd like to thank everybody that stopped by and had a look at the conversation. I hope to see some comments from you, and yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys again.
Thanks again, Sheldon. This was actually a lot of fun.
All right, John, we'll do it again, man. Have a great night.
You too. Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.